It's Wednesday evening. You're listening to Mystic Moon Cafe with Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. Every week, we will interview guests that are experts in various fields of the supernatural, paranormal, unexplained, and esoteric. So sit back and let us take you on a journey to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we broaden your horizons. Now, here's your hosts, Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. You're listening to Mystic Moon Cafe. The views and opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the network, or our sponsors.
And good Wednesday evening. This is Wendy, along with Travis here somewhere.
Sometimes,
Excuse me.
actually, sometimes you should come on and say, good evening, good Wednesday evening. This is Travis, and I'll come on and say I'm Wendy, and that will really mess with people.
We could blow our little listeners' minds right up.
We have little listeners.
Well,
I thought we marked
we
our
have big
shows.
listeners.
I was going to say I thought we
Actually,
marked this show MA.
Our demographic is between 35 years old and 55 years old. Our main demographic. We get a lot of others too, but
yeah, but our main, that stands to reason. I mean, it's we deal with some pretty potent stuff. It's not always in butter form either, but it's pretty potent.
Special butter. That's. It just brings to my mind my pipe fitter days, my heavy construction with the boys outside,
Pipe fitting, I get it.
Right, except for that, when they were, there was a certain type of piping systems called Victolic, where it was groove fit and then big collars put over it. And you had to have your boy butter to slick it all up so everything fit well.
Shut the hell up.
I can't. That's a true story.
Boy butter. Jesus.
Try being the only girl in screaming distance while they're talking about that stuff.
If you were in Congress right now, I would be hashtagging me too.
White squirrel, white squirrel.
White squirrel, white squirrel. Bluebells, white squirrel. Red ferning, red, white, and blue. It's patriotic. It's the New World Order, which we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yes, we are. Good segue, by the way.
I'm good like that. I'm not good any other way. God knows that, but I'm good like that.
I'm glad you said that, so I didn't have to, take the roasting of the Travis by the horns there.
Mm-hmm. I still think we need to do a roast. I still think that's a good idea.
Well, like I said, I think we kind of do it each and every show, so
we kind of
do apologize. I got all froggy.
You got a little froggy?
Got a little froggy.
Do you remember that? Did you ever sing that song, Frog in the Court? He did ride Crambo. Did anybody ever?
No. Okay. No, but it sounds a lot like a different song I know.
Okay. I don't know. I'm not going to sing, so.
You already did. Hey, you know what? Congratulations to your daughter and her spelling bee.
I know, she is awesome. Princess Leah Short is the Wise County spelling bee champ. She even though she didn't want to be, she is the champ.
Lo and behold, she is the champion.
It's so funny. She told me she did the school-wide spelling bee about a month ago, and she told me the night before. She's like, if it gets down to where it's like 2 or 3, and I'm one of them, she goes, I'm throwing it. She goes, because I do not want to compete countywide. I don't want to compete.
Right.
So it got down to, there were 3 students. She was the third, and she misspelled the word, and so she rotated out. But lo and behold, when countywide spelling bee rolled around, the top 3 had to compete. So even though she threw it, she still had to compete. She was. And she won. So very proud of her. She did an excellent job. I talked about her last week and her writing, and actually it wasn't last week, it was Friday, about her writing and her discipline and how she she's just a phenomenal writer. I actually, one show, I'm not sure when she turns it in, but I want to do one of 2 things. I'm either going to have her come on and read the paper that she wrote about me, or I'll bring it and read it. She had to choose a parent to write about, so she chose to write about me. She read it to me earlier this week, and it made me laugh my ass off, but it also made me cry. and very few things make me cry. But it's a very, very funny, and seeing me through her eyes is very, very enlightening and very, very entertaining. And I think it would be so much fun to read that paper, or bring her on and have her read it. I had a cousin on Friday night talking about his gaming channel. So
right,
10-year-old, internet hog pop on there and want to talk about his gaming.
He was there all night long.
He just kept he kept popping in and out. He was funny. He was hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think Shane took it all well, so it all worked very well.
Did. Oh, there are other stories that I could tell, but we'll save those for a snowy winter night in Wassel. So, which I made recently. Well, it's either mulled wine or mulled cider. It can be either.
Okay.
And so I actually did mulled cider this past weekend with the kids. We had mulled cider and non-alcoholic, of course, but just with spices and different things like that. Now, if you do mulled wine, mulled wine got me through one Christmas when I was married.
Oh lordy, okay.
I don't know. We'd probably been married about 5 years, and it was me and my then wife, her mother and her grandmother in a 2-bedroom condo.
Oh, what fun!
Pinhead himself, the Cenobite, could not have come up with a more horrific torture in hell. I stood in the kitchen and drank an entire crock pot of mulled wine by myself.
Oh, how sick were you then?
Oh, I wasn't. I was feeling no pain.
Until?
It was like, no, I didn't feel any pain.
The next day?
I mean, no, even then I didn't.
Interesting.
Oh, hell no. I was back in Lukenbach, Texas. Ain't nobody feeling no pain.
Ooh, I see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, white squirrel, butter, what? Something, I don't know. Anyway, see, nobody gets the butter comment because that was a story that was told when we ended the segment of Friday night, so nobody understands that. They will get it at some point because I will tell that story. It's a funny story. And
but you
at
could
some point,
implicate yourself in all kinds of things, and we just don't want that or need that.
Not right now. Not right now.
No.
But it's a very funny story. Very funny story. I was thinking, I just finished my 2nd-year anniversary at the radio station. I now have a whole new vacation schedule.
Ooh, yay!
I know. I just got new accrued vacation time, new sick days, all that stuff. I really am, I mentioned it Friday night, I really am thinking about coming to Kansas City. I think it would be fun to drive out for like a long weekend. And I could see you. We've never met. It would be fun to do that. Maybe have Carly come up from St. Louis, because she's like in St. Louis, right?
Right, yeah. Yep.
Have her come up and actually do
Are you on your headset? I'm sorry, I was getting a lot of, I can hear the echo of my own voice.
Oh, okay. No, well, I can't hear that. I am on my headset.
Good.
Yeah,
okay.
So yeah, it must just be on your end. I think it would be really kind of cool to do that. And I thought we could do like a live show somewhere and like invite people to come out and do like a live audience show and do a broadcast. I think that would be really kind of fun.
Well, we've got the Shane Friendsgiving thing in June, but I don't know if you were thinking earlier than that or further on. God knows the weather changes so quickly between here and there, during the winter. So,
I'd be open to either. I just think it'd be really kind of fun to do something like that, and then let people ask us questions or ask me questions. I don't know. We could do a roast. You could roast me live in Kansas City.
We could roast the shit right out of you, couldn't we?
That would take a lot of roasting. I'm in advertising and PR. It would take a lot of roasting to roast the shit out.
That is true. That is true.
We have. I need to tell folks we will not be live next Wednesday night.
No.
We will be. I am unfortunately the owner of the radio station where I manage. Has decided that's going to be our office Christmas party Wednesday night. So I'm going to be otherwise entertaining at that. Actually, I'm going to be cooking Tuesday night and entertaining Wednesday night. So we're going to have to make a slight schedule adjustment next week, either rescheduling. Because I did look, and I'm sorry I didn't send it to you, but yes, the authors of the Mind Control book did want the 13th.
Okay.
They
well,
did.
Too bad, huh?
So yeah, I know. So I told them, I said, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to see if they could do that Thursday night or that Friday night, and if not, then offer them the following Wednesday, the 20th, which would be the Wednesday before Christmas. Okay. So, but we have a great show lined up tonight. One of our reoccurring guests. And I do like the fact that we have reoccurring guests. I like the fact that people don't just come on one time and say, "Screw you, we're never coming back."
Oh, I know. But everybody, all I have to do is pop onto either Facebook chat or whatever and go, "Hey, what you doing? You want to be on?" Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I am talking to the parties to which we mentioned on the previous show, and we've got the Mages of Badassery Unhinged group together, and,
awesome.
And we're planning something. Everybody's a little bit busy right now, but soon, very soon.
Very cool. So we've got a lot of stuff lined up. Great guest, always great guest. New books coming out right and left. So especially coming up, the first quarter is a really busy time with books being released. We've got Nick Redfern on tonight. We're going to be bringing him on in just a few minutes. He's talking about his new book, the New World Order book. Already talked with him about coming back on after the first of the year. He's got another book that'll be released sometime in January, early February. Bring him back on. We're going to bring Andrea Parham back on. We're going to bring Bill Bean back on. Cindy McKean is going to come back on. Shane is going to be coming back on.
Probably Mike Nichols will be back on.
Mike Nichols will be R.L. King will be coming back on. So just, all of these great guests that we have. And what I love is that all of these guests have so many things going on. We can bring them on throughout the year to talk about different things. And I swear to God, if I actually didn't have something that preoccupied me, like 90% of the time with managing these radio stations, we would actually go multiple days a week just so we could keep people on and just so we could do more shows.
Well, I think we could still throw in one if you really wanted to get in there, but I won't push you. It is almost the holiday season.
Yeah, I was going to say, not right now. Let me see what I can come up with. Let's see what happens in 2018.
Yeah, I'm the elder. I'm supposed to be the one who can't keep up with all of these things.
Yeah, well, between the two radio stations and the political candidate and helping Susan Bell with her project, and I'm beginning to that great quote from the first Lord of the Rings movie where Bilbo Baggins is talking to Gandalf, and he says, "I feel like butter spread over too much toast," and that's exactly how I feel. So I've got to find a way to kind of rein some things in and grab some control. I've got to just grab it by the hair and own it. And I really, really edited that whole statement right then, just in case you were wondering. I really did, because I wanted to go a totally different direction.
Real good idea.
I will tell you one story, and then we're going to get Nick Redfern on.
Okay.
Because, you and I have had this conversation. I've had this conversation with my employees about this whole, all of these accusations being brought against, mainly men in Hollywood for sexual misconduct, and which is horrible. It really, really is.
Agreed.
But part of the problem is when you are in broadcasting in the entertainment industry, we are losing our appreciation for sarcasm and a sense of humor. And a lot of times things are said. A lot of times things are said, and they're meant to be funny. And unfortunately,
or just this lighthearted, like the banter you and I do back and forth here.
Exactly.
Believe it or not, Travis and I have never met each other face to face. We're not, involved beyond being buddies, basically. And
I know.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun. We can insult each other. We can flirt. We can do whatever the hell we want and still be fun.
Exactly, and nothing is taken too seriously, and nothing is taken, and neither one of us takes anything out of context and reads more into it. It's just what it is. I was watching a couple weeks ago. I was watching the old Dean Martin roasts, that they did from the MGM Grand there in Las Vegas, and I was watching them, and they were so inappropriate, and the racial jokes were there, the sexist jokes were there,
but they're making fun of everybody. They're not targeting one certain minority or demographic. They're going after everybody, including each other and themselves.
Exactly, and that's what we've missed, and that's where we've gotten to the point where we don't have an appreciation of what sarcasm or a sense of humor is anymore. Nope. And literally just yesterday, I had the senior communications director for a senator in Kentucky send me a 50-second soundbite to use on my talk show that I do on Wednesday mornings.
Okay.
And they've been running about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And so she sent, and it is a female, she sent me a 50-second soundbite. And her email said, let me know if you're going to be using this in any form, fashion, or in its entirety. And I simply sent back, I will be using it in its entirety on my show. She emailed back almost immediately, glad to hear it, shorter is better. And I literally had typed and was about to hit send, and I stopped. I literally had typed, said no woman ever.
Said that in the history of history.
Right. And I swear to God, I'm like, I can't do that. It's funny. I don't mean anything. I'm not coming on. It's just a funny statement.
It was a funny statement. It was the perfect setup. How a senator, was that right? A senator?
It was a senator, yeah.
How a senator leaves themselves so wide open for that.
Exactly.
Oh, my word.
They're just asking for it. And so I say that, and that's just my segue. But, if people listen to the show, and I do, so I get a little raunchy sometimes. I say things, I mean nothing by it. I make statements, and I don't mean to offend. And if I do, I do intend to offend everyone. I'm not choosing any one particular ethnic group or race or sexual orientation.
Trust me, he's equal opportunity offensive.
I am. It's because it is funny.
It is funny. You gotta have fun. You gotta roll with it. Just keep a sense of humor. If people become overly aggressive with you, once again, we'll have to go back to a little bit of my history of being a 5'0" woman in the construction industry. And Wendy, how do you handle it? How do you do this? Said, well, there's a lot of deflection, there's a lot of humor, and if they want to pursue, there's always a 24-inch pipe wrench upside their heads to stop them.
See, shorter's not always better.
That's true.
Sometimes
it's just the right size.
12 inches wasn't enough.
But then again,
it's not the size, it's how you use it.
You need that 15-pound wrench.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying. Mm-hmm. We like to make people laugh, and we like to joke.
We make each other laugh continuously.
We do.
So, yeah.
We do.
It wouldn't be worth it if we didn't.
No, absolutely not. So that may just become, I may have to record a whole new disclaimer. Listen to the show, laugh, or just don't listen. Just take us for what we are. We're not.
We had out, right?
Right. Well, we had somebody message us that, wow, you guys do a lot of talking at the beginning of the show. We listen for your guests, and that's great, and we appreciate you listening for the guests. But honestly, and Wendy and I talked about this, honestly, the banter at the beginning of the show started out as a way to test this new platform because there were bugs that we were trying to work out, kinks we were trying to figure out. Right, yeah. And so we were talking and bantering, giving Wendy or Carly or whomever was running the control the time to make sure that everything was working the way that it was supposed to work. And it just kind of became part of the show because our show is organic. We don't always end at 11 o'clock. Or 10 o'clock, or whatever fucking time it is, wherever you are. I don't know. I don't have clocks on my walls. I don't know. Greenwich Mean Time, wherever you are, we let it flow. We have fun with it, and we hope that our guests and our listeners have fun with it too.
Absolutely, yes.
And having said that, I'm going to shut up. And Wendy's got a song.
I find that hard to believe.
I know, it's funny. The one who talks a whole lot's named Travis. The one who's really quiet is Wendy, and she doesn't say anything.
Oh, I just let you go along. You know,
I know.
I occasionally
she's like,
roll
here's
back
the rope.
to my 70s and 80s roots and burn you, but otherwise...
You're like, here's the rope. You just keep going. Eventually, you'll fall off. Eventually, you fall off the branch and hang yourself. You keep going.
As I'm checking all of our tech and making sure everybody, you know, we're not getting messages of "Would you shut up and get on with it?"
No, not a problem. You, I know, have picked a great song.
Well, of course I have.
Because you're good like that.
I am good like that. Yes, I believe this evening we will go with Lonesome Wyatt when he is playing with those poor bastards, and it's a sacrificial lamb, and I think it really fits tonight's theme of New World Order and a lot of the political connotations associated with it. How was that?
I was going to try to repeat what you said, but hell, I can't even. It's a song about a lamb and some poor bastard.
It's by those poor bastards.
Oh, okay, sorry. I see.
And the song is called Sacrificial Lamb.
I missed
it. Sponsor, you know, I'm trying to see if we can do a commercial to get my dogs some special supplements for their little joints and bodies. But if they're listening tonight, we're just having fun. We do get serious occasionally.
I was going to say, hell, we're picking up sponsors for special supplements. I've got a list.
As for so many good ones, they don't make it for humans anymore. And although we can take the animal formula, we could grow tails.
You know, again, I'm reining it in. So play the song.
Okay, I'm going to play the song and try to get Nick on the line. Hold on, I'm muting Travis.
Thank you.
Where I go, I will lead, and everyone will follow me through the shit, through the snow, anywhere I want to go. Whoa, 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 whoa. You are all rotten fruit. I'll crush you underneath my hoof. Then I'll take the poison juice and feed it to my chosen few. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa. Who will be my sacrificial lamb? I once thought I was just a worthless rat like all the rest. Scared to move, scared to breathe, a puddle of disgust and greed. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, sucking in the dust of man and shouldering his burden, saving all my carnal thoughts for the holy blessed Virgin. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa. Who will be my sacrificial lamb? How I hate all this noise blocking out my master's voice. No one here shall make a peep if they want their soul to keep. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa. There I've said all I can.
And that was those poor bastards with Sacrificial Lamb. We have Nick Redfern on the phone, and Travis is leading him astray, so go, guys.
I was not leading him astray. You know, you go from a sacrificial lamb to a scapegoat, like I'm leading him out of the tribe.
Well, I was brought up a good Catholic.
Actually, it's difficult to lead me astray.
Yeah, I
haven't done or seen.
I'm good, but I'm not that good.
Oh, so he's the leader of the pack this evening. Okay, I get it. I understand.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can lead some people astray and have. Nick is not one of those. Nick always Nick stays the course. So it's good to have Nick back on with us. We were talking in our little banter back and forth with Wendy and I, Nick. You know, we love having reoccurring guests. You know, we have yet to have a guest come on and go, "Screw you guys, we're never coming back on your show." and you have been gracious enough to be on our show many times. And we love having you on. And you're just such a prolific writer. It is so easy to book you because you have something coming out like every couple of months. So it's like, okay, Nick will come back on. We're going to have Nick on this show. We're going to talk about this. We did a little. We kind of screwed up a little bit with our with some of our social media marketing. Earlier, we had mentioned one particular book, which we can't really mention and talk about, although we can mention it in very, very vague terms and veiled terms, which we will in a little bit. But Nick has a new book out called The New World Order Book. I got it by accident, so I'm not sending it back. I actually had requested Shapeshifters, and then I got this one. And actually two different publishing houses, if I'm not, because I think Shapeshifters was New Page, I think. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to look at New Page, and then New World Order.
No, excuse me. Shapeshifters is Llewellyn.
Llewellyn, right? And this one is Visible Ink. And New World Order is Visible Ink.
What sometimes happens is a lot of the publishers tend to use the same freelance people for publicity. You say a lot of the people who run the publicity campaigns, they actually don't work specifically for the publishers. They're hired. So sometimes you get a crossover where one point, the publicist on one book will be the same one on the next book, but they're two different companies. They just hire them for like a 2-month period to promote the book or whatever. So.
Absolutely. I've been on that list myself a couple of times. So, but Nick is on. He's talking with us about the New World Order book. I'm going to give you. I feel like it's almost stupid to give your bio anymore because you're on so regularly. But I'm going to read your bio as to the author Nick Redfern. He is the author of numerous books on conspiracies and the paranormal. Unexplained Mysteries, including Visible Ink Press's Secret History, Conspiracies from Ancient Aliens to the New World Order, Secret Societies, The Complete Guide to History's Rites and Rituals, The Bigfoot Book, The Encyclopedia of Sasquatch, Yeti, and Cryptid Primates, The Monster Book, which the Monster Book I own, love it, Creatures, Beasts, Friends of Nature, as well as Real Men in Black, own that one, The NASA Conspiracies, The Strange Secrets, and On the Trail of the Saucer Spies. He's appeared on more than 70 TV shows, including the BBC's Out of This World, the Sci-Fi Channel's Proof Positive, the History Channel's America's Book of Secrets, Ancient Aliens, one of my favorites, and UFO Hunters, Science's The Unexplained Files, and National Geographic Channel's Paranatural. Originally from the UK, he now resides on the fringes of Dallas, Texas. I love the fact that they use the word fringe in your bio because you do kind of exist on the fringe of everything real and paranormal. Nick Redfern.
That's true.
I was hashtag Redferning. Thank you so much for being on the show again.
Oh, thanks, Travis.
It is always a pleasure to talk with you, my friend. And I call you my friend, even though I know that that's presumptuous on my part, but I call you my friend. So it is great to have you back on with us. Now, last time we had you on, we were talking shapeshifters, and we got into an amazing discussion about all of the paranormal stories, the mythologies, various cultures, things like that. The new book that you have out, the New World Order book, is a little different. It's not the same type of It's not really a book that you would say you could pick up and that you would read cover to cover, although you can. It really is kind of a researcher's guide is the way that I would look at it. If you have an interest in a New World Order conspiracy, you just pick it up and start with A, and you can read it cover to cover. You can go topographically, you can go alphabetically, you could just open it up and go, okay, I'm going to read this one.
Well, actually, there's a reason for that. A couple of reasons. Visible Inc. Always kind of have their books in that style where there's 200 entries in A to Z style. And one of the reasons is because the books run to about 450 pages. And you're right, reading kind of like a 150,000 word, 400-page book in one go from front to back, can be pretty daunting, even for me, as a writer and a reader. So that's why they do them in that style, is because you can just sort of dip in wherever you want, and find a 2-page section on one subject and a 1.5-page section on something else. And so, in other words, you get like a detailed study of all the various things in A to Z form, and you can sort of, like I said, just dip into it here or there and just see whichever takes your interest as you go through it. So.
Yeah, well, and this particular book clocks in at 392 pages, not counting the further reading and your appendices. So, including all of that and the index, this particular book clocks in at 430 pages. So, yeah, I mean, it's. But I have to say this, and I am not Redferning. This is me being very, very. Shut up, Wendy. This is me being very, very objective. I have read many of your books. Some of the longer ones, some of the shorter ones, books like this. I have never had a problem sitting down and reading yours from cover to cover, because you write in such a conversation. It's like, honestly, I swear to God, it's like sitting down at a pub and having a couple of drinks and then talking all night about the subject.
Well, that's good to know. It's, as I said, it is one of those things where you have to sort of, be careful not to sort of swamp the reader, with sort of 30-page long chapters here and there, which can be a bit mind-numbing, but I think the way they do the books with Visible Ink, like this A to Z kind of like a coffee table meets a reference guide kind of thing.
Absolutely.
I think it's a good way of doing it. And, of course, it's a very different way of writing that I do, for, say, Shapeshifters or some of the road trip type books I write. So, in other words, you're sort of writing for a different audience from the paranormal angle, and you're also writing in a different style as well, I guess, really. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you have your research books, which I would, really consider this one, or a tabletop, just want to sit down and, pick it up and say, okay, I'm going to read about alien abductions. And so there's maybe a section about alien abductions, as opposed to Shapeshifters where you break it down. You've got werewolves, you've got panther people, you've got, the cat people, you've got, the possibility of Mothman being a shapeshifter, as we talked about, all these different things, and it's broken down by subject matter. And then, like the Real Men in Black, where you just outline story after story after story of encounters with those individuals. So you are extremely diverse in the way in which you write. As again, you're right there on the fringe, my friend. You're right there. I mean, you exist on the fringes of all of those writing styles.
Well, that's good to know. People. It's always good to get feedback as to what people think. And there's some subjects I don't write about because I'm just not interested. Like ghosts, I'm not really interested in ghosts and haunted houses and things like that. And there's certain things in conspiracies that I'm interested in. Other ones I'm not so interested in. But when they ask me about, do you want to do sort of like an A to Z 200 entry book on all the different, things that are going on in today's world, and with the whole New World Order stuff and surveillance, and I thought, time-wise, it was kind of timely and relevant, to put out something that a lot of people in today's society today can actually relate to,
Absolutely. Now, as kind of a springboard for this particular topic, because it is a very daunting and overwhelming subject. define, when we're talking the New World Order, what are you talking about, and what are we talking about when we're having that discussion? When we talk about a New World Order, what are we really looking at?
Well, that's a good question, because I mentioned this in the book. The various definitions that have been put forward for the New World Order, and in many respects, it's different things to different people. But for a lot of people, it comes down to the idea of the erosion of civil liberties, the rise of the culture of surveillance and loss of privacy, and the kind of living in a sort of darker, more daunting world than in the past. That's how a lot of people kind of view the whole idea of the New World Order. Then you have sort of an offspring from that, if you like, of the idea that the New World Order itself, regardless of what it is, this scenario that it's controlled by sort of a global elite rather than down to the actual individual governments. It may, one of the big theories is that a lot of the things that go on that we don't like, it looks like it's the work of governments, when in reality, it's, the theory is it's like a global elite of extremely powerful and influential people who have the ability to manipulate government as well as us. So they stay in the background, and we don't actually see who's pulling the strings. So those are broadly, the imagery that people have when they talk about the New World Order. And of course, you have some extreme theories at one end and sort of more down to earth, but still conspiratorial at the other. And with most people somewhere, veering between the two.
Well, we call it a New World Order, but I mean, it's almost going back like into the darker ages when it was just the very elite who were just horrid people controlling all of the masses. I see a lot of parallels there.
Yeah, and I mean, that actually sort of, it's interesting you bring up that issue of, sort of times long gone, because today's New World Order very much sort of parallels what we've got in the distant past, 400 or 500 years ago, with secret societies, which weren't necessarily, obviously, working globally, but they were working to influence, specific nations, or particularly like Europe back in the Middle Ages, and where you wouldn't have the New World Order of today, but you would certainly have powerful people in, secret groups like the Illuminati and things like that, which, have become so legendary, people still talk about them today. So I think, we've got a situation where in the past we had these secret societies, and then, of course, the world was very much separated, the countries, there was no phones, no internet, obviously, nothing like that. Yeah. And today, that sort of angle of secret societies, I think, still there, but it's been sort of incorporated into this sort of global elite. So you have people in the world of politics, government, the military, the intelligence communities that potentially could be part of this New World Order, but they're also allied to some of these ritualistic organizations as well, the two kind of cross in a very strange way.
Completely.
One of the things that I think, throws people all the time is the word new in there. We think this is a new concept and a new construct. It really isn't. What we're talking about is a global conspiracy that has many, many iterations throughout history. This is just the newest iteration.
Well, you're right, and I think one of the reasons why people refer to it as a New World Order is chiefly because, certainly with the rise of the internet over the last 20 years, we have instant data, news, history, everything at our fingertips in seconds, if not less than seconds. And so for that reason, a lot of people are seeing things that they haven't seen before, maybe, but with the easy access to the net, they get interested and they follow it. It's for people who sort of, 35, 40 upwards, they would easily remember how just 20, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, if you wanted to do historical data, you'd have to go to your local library, and get books out.
Go through the archives.
Or use like one of those old microfiche machines, And so for a lot of people, it was such hard work, and so they didn't realise that a lot of this was going on then. And so today, I think they call it the New World Order only because it's like, wow, we can we can have access to all this material. So it kind of seems new compared to the fact that it was so difficult to find it 20 years ago. But it basically was all still going on then. It was just hard to find. That was all.
So, did you as a researcher and author, did you have a unique and personal interest in the New World Order conspiracy theories, or was this something that you're like, maybe I'll get into it and maybe I'll find it interesting?
Well, I mean, whenever I'm thinking about writing a book, there's several things to keep in mind. One is, is the readership going to enjoy it? Am I going to be able to bring something new to the table that makes it not just like a rehash? And also, because writing and researching a book like this took about 6 months, am I going to enjoy it? Actually doing this for 6 months, or is it going to be a nightmare? So I always sort of do some sort of cursory background first to see, what I'm getting into. If it's something that I'm not normally known for writing about, like the Men in Black or Bigfoot or the Chupacabra or whatever. And I felt that, if I was going to be writing a 400-page book on, say, the Illuminati, that would be a really major effort, major project, But by actually writing something which encompasses the entire New World Order, but which is split into 200 sections of a couple of pages each, that I actually like that idea of, having like a bullet point, bang, 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 couple of pages to really, in a deep way, but also, just over a couple of pages, so people get a good understanding of this group or the Illuminati or the Masons or whatever. But that they get it in a couple of pages rather than having to have their mind blown, by 400 pages just on one topic. So doing it that way, I was quite comfortable, when the publisher said, would you be interested in this?
So sitting down, I mean, again, it's a daunting task to explain the New World Order as a concept, let alone the various conspiracy theories that comprise it. So how, as we launch into this interview tonight, how would you set the stage for what we're talking about?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think the one thing I didn't want to do was have stories that were just repetitive, just one after the other, and it was kind of very similar. So, in other words, you've got things in the book like plans to, or rumors and theories that, there might be a group plotting to create like a faked alien invasion. The idea to, what looks like a real alien invasion of the planet is actually a ruse, a brilliant sort of advanced plan to place us under all sort of martial law and control and put the blame on aliens who actually aren't aliens. This ties in with something that's known as Project Bluebeam, rumours of this sort of all-powerful program to sort of deceive us by creating these holographic images in the sky, and, the countries get placed in a state of emergency and martial law, and it's in a way to, sort of create an iron-fisted New World Order, but using a ruse. And one of the other things that interest me, are these fears that people have about, within the next few years, 15, 20 years, we're all going to have implants in us, tracking devices, etc. So, from being able to go from faked alien invasions to, implants to, the rise of iPhone surveillance and monitoring, you can come up with a lot of completely different angles, but which all work in with the New World Order. So that's one of the things I wanted to do, was to sort of make every section of the book different. So, you know, you would really get jumped from like UFOs to, you know, chips and implants, to the Illuminati, then to Bohemian Grove, you know, and just so the reader wouldn't just think, oh, well, every story's, you know, just like the one before or whatever.
Yeah, I was going to say, literally, if you look at the content section, he does literally give you a little bit of everything. You start from alchemy, and you end at the 0 hour. And literally, it is everything that you could possibly imagine and plot out from A to Z. So what I want to do is I want to go through here. I've read it again. You know, it's been a very fun read, a very interesting read. And like I said, I didn't read it in order. I didn't read it from cover to cover. I read it based on what I was interested in and what intrigued me whenever I happened to sit down and have a few moments. So I mean, it is like the perfect conspiracy theory book for someone with ADD. You can just sit down and just go from there, and just pick it up. So now let me preface where we go from here by saying my earliest experiences with the New World Order came from growing up in a very religious, evangelical Christian, Southern Christian home. And so growing up in those churches, there was this pulpit pounding, Bible thumping against the New World Order, against the coming of the Antichrist, against the coming of, you know, the mark of the beast and the number of the beast and all that. So, you know, from a very early age, I'm 40, I'll be 42 in January, and my parents started attending one of these churches when I was 3. So for 39 years of my life, you know, this was indoctrinated in me. We heard about it. We saw videos, propaganda from the evangelical right on the New World Order, you know, even down to the slogan on the dollar bill, you know, and what that means, and the unfinished pyramid and its connection to the Knights Templar and the Illuminati. So all of this has been bombarded to me, but it was bombarded upon me from a very, very narrow scope. It was very against, very anti-God, very anti-Christian, very anti-religious. So that was my very earliest introduction to the New World Order. As I grew up and as I went to college and as I began reading things besides the King James Version 1611 and actually started reading books by educated authors and writers and having an understanding of the New World Order, I gained a better insight. And the conspiracy theories, there's many things that you mentioned here, I've heard preachers preach about for 30 years. It's not new. They were saying this stuff, you know, back in the 1980s, back in the late 70s and into the 90s. So it's very interesting whenever I sit down, I'm going, okay, yeah, heard them preach about that, heard them preach about that. Oh, know that one. Yeah, this one I heard in Sunday school. So it's an interesting, it was almost like a refresher course for me in many ways in having grown up like that. So it was very, very educational and enlightening once again. Now I'm going to start with what I think is probably one of the most far-fetched, interesting aspects. It's not sensational by any means, but because Wendy and I were talking earlier, and I mentioned this one, and she's like, "What? You mentioned that obesity is a conspiracy theory component of the New World Order." Now we're coming up on the holiday season. Everybody, including me, is packing on that little extra weight.
Yep.
We've not been able to push ourselves away from the table. We've had Thanksgiving dinner after Thanksgiving dinner, and now it's office Christmas party after office Christmas party. How does obesity play into a New World Order conspiracy theory?
Well, the theory, I mean, granted, this is one of the most, you know, you have sort of tapped into one of the most controversial conspiracy theories in the entire book, but that's a good way to start, you know, sort of just go right in at the deep end. Now, the theory is that, you know, the rise of obesity results, one of the side effects, unfortunately, you know, is ill health. Mm-hmm. Ill health requires a person for the most, to go on to drugs or, medicines to help their health, which requires more medication, which requires, more medical costs, insurance, etc. And so the theory is that the pharmaceutical industries are involved in some sort of like a vast conspiracy with the, to encourage, to encourage the, the idea that food's our god, and in other words, the massive profits that come from the growing ill health coming from obesity. Now, whether or not there's any truth to it or not, that's the big question. The way I sort of present the book is in many of the stories is to relate what the conspiracy theorists think and what people on the other side of the table think, rather than me force my ideas or thoughts on all this. But that is basically the theory. That food leads to ill health, obesity, all leads to more medicines, leads to more money for the pharmaceutical industries and so on. And the big business.
Blood pressure medications, heart medications, insulin. Now, I've been diabetic since I was 2 years old, so there was no escaping regardless. But it just keeps growing, and it's so out of control. The pharmaceutical companies, I believe that there was a cure out there. I believe it has been silenced. And, is it a conspiracy theory, or is it what I'm watching happen right in front of me?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, it's really difficult to, to say, where the truth begins, so to speak, and, the conspiracies start, so to speak. But, regardless of which way you look at it, with conspiracy or not, there's no doubt that there's been sort of massive rise in obesity in the last 10, 15 years. And I think a lot of it's just, we live kind of very, sedentary lives, where a lot of people today, stay at home. They get all their information from their iPhone. You don't see as many kids riding around town on their bikes till 7 o'clock like they did when I was a kid,
Right, until the street lights came on.
Yeah, exactly. And Mum and Dad be like, "Well, just make sure you're home, when the moon comes up or whatever."
Right.
And but you don't see that anymore. And I think you put that, if you combine that with, portions in restaurants which have grown as well, then inevitably it has this sort of spiral. Now it's not, I'm not criticising anyone or anything like that. I wouldn't want people to think that. It's just how society's changing, in the same way that 50, 60 years ago, people would go to the theatre regularly, or, it's just trends change. That's all it is. The big question is whether or not, there's a conspiracy at the heart of it. But what it does come down to is that pharmaceutical organizations and companies and corporations all around the world, their profits have risen specifically because of these reasons.
By 200, 300, 400%.
Yeah, and I think also, there's this issue where you're almost encouraged to think you're ill because, it's like, do you wake up on a Monday morning feeling down, Well, yeah, I wake up on a Monday morning feeling down, not because I've got some weird syndrome. It's just because I've just had a nice weekend and now it's the week.
It's Monday,
you don't need to be on a drug because somebody says you've got Monday morning syndrome or whatever. No, you haven't. You're just like everybody else. It's a Monday.
It's life. Suck it up, Buttercup. I mean,
yeah, and I think sometimes people have been encouraged to get on drugs because they feel they need to.
Right, the mood altering or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, do you wake up with a dry mouth? You've got dry mouth syndrome. Well, you might ask yourself better, how much water do you drink, or you're just living on coffee and nothing else, well, then you are going to have a dry mouth, Just put some more water into your system instead of...
Or if you're Travis, all that wine in your system.
Hey, let's not pick on Travis. Pay no attention to the wino behind the microphone.
Well, I'm kind of like that, I like my beer, but if I have a few beers on a Friday night, before I go to bed, I always have like a pint of water so I don't get that bad head, on Saturday morning. So. So in other words, this is how some of the stuff in the book's presented is, is there a conspiracy, or is it just due to, trends and the whole obesity thing? You can look at it from both angles, that this is some sort of pharmaceutical plot, or it's just the way society changes,
Right.
Trends change, kids don't play out so much, portions are getting bigger. You can look at it from an entirely innocent way, or you can look at it from a sinister way as well.
Right.
Well, and I think, it kind of, again, goes back to, and I'll hearken back to the religious upbringing, that mentality, eat, drink, be merry, that leads to a slothful, complacent life. That leads to a life of indulgence. And when you lead to a life of indulgence, then you have a life that is rife for disaster because you're not paying attention to anything. And we have we've become sheep to the slaughter. We really have.
Yes.
I mean, we believe everything that we're told. We believe everything that we read. I swear to God, if somebody tells me, well, I saw it on Facebook, I'm going to go, really? Don't make me go up your head. I don't care if you saw it on Facebook. I don't care if, it. But we are so easily led into things that nobody thinks for themselves anymore.
No, you're right.
And I'm branded an outcast.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people
It doesn't bother
don't.
me, but there it is.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, they watch the news, and whichever their favorite news channel is, they buy into it, or they just buy out of the other person's channel and say that's just lies. But it can't be both. So somebody's right or somebody's wrong, but we do kind of get I think people do get reliant on what they read or what they hear. And I think part of it is sort of like the culture of fear that's sort of grown in the last few years, to be distrustful of an entire race of people who really, for the most part, they're no different than the rest of us, It's just their governments that are screwing things up. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of back to McCarthyism and Nazism, even. Just the fanatics versus the people who are just like, what?
Yeah, I mean, in the apartments where I live, it's like a completely multicultural place, and everybody's friendly. Everybody says hello, and everybody keeps a lookout. If there's something left on your doorstep, they'll take it in until you come back and whatever, So
That's the best
it's a shame, we live in a world where, yes, there are bad people, but it doesn't mean everybody from a particular place is a bad person. It's just, but sometimes I think we're kind of encouraged to think that, somebody from thousands of miles away, he's got a beard,
Oh my God, no.
and a funny name, and really, it's that's how the world's become. And again, you can look at it, is that just as a result of events that have happened, or is there a secret encouragement to kind of isolate us, and to live in fear of other people or whatever. So.
Isolationism,
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep everyone
The more
divided and
isolated you are, the easier you are to control.
Absolutely.
Which, ironically, isolationism is not one of the topics that you cover in the New World Order book.
No, it's not actually.
It's not, but it does lend itself to that conspiracy. The more you can isolate and cause division, the easier, ironically, the easier it is to control.
Yeah, and I think the more people are controlled, and when they live in a state of fear, they just then turn to governments and say, do whatever you have to do to protect us. And that's, yes, we need protecting from bad people, but also there's the fact that when you go down that path of, just do what you've got to do, just protect us, we don't need to know how you do it, then it can become dangerous, when people just hand over and say, okay, just get it done, and when something doesn't actually necessarily need to be done,
Exactly.
Becomes a point of who protects us from that particular government or whatever now.
Yeah.
Who protects us from the protectors?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why, the world is in such flux today, because we just don't know who's right, who's wrong, like the whole thing of like alternative facts, which is like, which is one of the most chilling phrases of the 21st century. But it's true, there aren't any alternative facts. There are facts, and there are things that aren't facts. There's not alternative facts.
No,
right.
But, not remotely.
Yeah, but that's something that's, creeping in now. Well, that's not quite right, not quite, the truth, because there's another side to the fact. Well, no, there actually isn't.
No, right. It either happened this way or it didn't.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
exactly.
You can have an alternative theory or an alternative concept. You can't have an alternative fact.
No.
Okay, so I'm going to digress for just a second, because this is a topic that we've discussed on this program with a couple of guests, but never with you, Nick. So I'm curious, talking about alternative facts, alternative reality, what is your take on the Mandela Effect? Now, and this is not part of the New World Order book, and I understand that. But
well, in what sense do you mean, though?
Well, first of all, I know you know what it is. I know you're familiar. But, I mean, what is your take? Do you think that there is something going on that is changing our perception of reality? Is reality being changed, or is it our perception?
Well, it's always difficult to say, but I think, there's no doubt that, when it comes to the nature of what reality is versus what reality may not be, I think, you can look at it from the perspective that today, in today's world, there are a lot of people who are deeply interested in, like, for example, the paranormal, for one thing. There's certainly been a rise of that in the last 10, 15 years, and again, that's, been through the internet as well, a lot of it. And I think a lot of people are quite open to the idea of sort of supernatural phenomena, whether they're into it deeply or not, but they'll watch a TV show far more than they would, 20 years ago. So I think there's more of an interest and an embracing of, realities beyond ours. But I think also, there's which is kind of like a similar thing about what reality is. I think more and more people are coming round to the idea that a lot of the things we're told that define I'm not talking like a supernatural reality, I'm just talking about reality in general. There's a situation where more and more people are questioning what they're told. Is the reality that we're being fed actually really, is it reality? Or is it, some sort of cover story to keep us in our place? But again, you can go back thousands of years and looking into ancient cultures where they were heavily reliant in their decision making on, for example, the local witch doctor or the local shaman who would get into like an altered state by taking reality blurring hallucinogenics and psychedelics, and that the shaman would come out of that unreality state, and his words would define, what the organisation or the village or the people of the town would do. So in other words, you can go back a long time and find how reality was defined in very different ways to how it's defined today, and plans were made according to all sorts of things today that we would not even think about, having a bearing on reality. But I think a lot of people are looking at reality from the paranormal angle and finding it intriguing, but they're also looking at it from the black and white world of, is the reality we're fed on the news really reality? So I think there is this kind of climate of people becoming cynical about what defines reality, and a lot of people demonstrating and standing up and saying, hey, this is wrong, and that's for people to have their say, and hundreds of thousands of people doing a peaceful protest. That's encouraging.
So now let me take it to another level and a different layer. There are individuals, and we've had Bill Bean, for example, who come on and he talks about changes in Bible passages that people remember them saying one thing, and then now the Bible says something totally different, or movie quotes, or brand logos, or the Berenstain Bears versus the Berenstain Bears, different things like that. And I'll give you a real world example that happened just the other night, and I feel like a total idiot for what I'm about to say, but this happened.
That's okay.
Up,
you're used to that.
Shut up, Wendy. I know. We're talking. My 13-year-old daughter just became the county-wide spelling bee contest winner for her home county.
Oh.
And I was helping her. I was going. There's 367 words on this list, and some of the words I didn't even know what they meant. And here I have. I've got 2 years into a master's degree. I've been in broadcasting my entire adult life. 25 years of 25 of the 41 years have been in broadcasting, and then I've 2 years of a master's degree in theology. And there's some of these words I'm going, what the hell does that even mean? But there was a word that she brought up, and I was sitting at the table. It was my ex-wife and I were sitting there, and my ex-wife was reading the word. My ex-wife is dyslexic, so I expect her to read words differently and mispronounce and have a problem. And so she said the word putrefaction. And so my daughter then spelled it. And I said, what the hell is putrefaction? And
slime.
My daughter picked up her phone and she Googled it, and it was like, the process of decay and dying. So that's putrefaction. Mm-hmm. My entire life I had heard the word pronounced, and I have written the word and said the word putrefaction. Mm-hmm. But it is now spelled putrefaction.
Oh, well, I would call it putrefaction.
Thank you. Okay, mm-hmm. See, this got us on this whole, because my kids have also become huge into this, the Mandela Effect. It's this huge conversation that goes on online. I'm going, putrefaction is the way I've heard it pronounced. It's the way I've spelled it. It's the way I've read it my entire adult life. But my daughter, my ex-wife, they looked it up on their phones. They pulled it up on different web, and it's putrefaction.
Huh. I think it's both. I honestly remember both ways, both spellings, pronunciations.
But now it's not even giving the other as an alternate spelling.
Interesting.
If you Google it, it will say, "Did you mean putrefaction?"
Huh.
So it was a very interesting firsthand experience for me. I've done, movie quotes I get, because you hear something, you remember it one way, it's said something differently. Posters, brand logos. I mean, I've been doing branding and rebranding my entire life. You change, you alter, you make modifications to meet whatever is hip and happening and selling at that point. But a particular word that I have used, that I have written, that I have spelled, that I have used when I was a minister, I used in sermons, and to have it all of a sudden be spelled and pronounced a totally different way. So I'm like, okay. So is there, and this is where this is kind of how I'm drawing it back to the conspiracy theory, is there the possibility that that there is something happening not to our own reality that is causing us to remember things differently or to see things differently, so that it is impacting our reality, not necessarily in a I believe it to be different, but all of a sudden I remember one thing and I'm seeing in black and white, or I'm hearing, through Siri or Google, what I remember isn't even doesn't even exist anymore.
Well, I mean, I think you can look at it from two ways, really. One would be, the angle that, there's something really weird going on, or, the angle of, how the memory can play tricks. And, it's kind of like, you watch a movie when you were 12 and you thought it was really great and you have all these memories of it, and then you watch it again, and not only is it not so great, but parts of the story in the movie actually different to what your memories are, you know what I mean?
Right.
That does happen. Or you read in a book and you were sure that the character was named this or that, and it turns out, it was something else. But, there are people who've kind of suggested that, not so much conspiracy-based, but almost like paranormal-based. Some people have suggested, that when we get these memories, which we're sure we saw something and then it's proved that it didn't exist or whatever, the idea that there are ripples in time, ripples in reality, and you remember them, but, in a strange fashion with these time ripples, it never actually happened. I mean, I'll give you a classic example. This veers away from New World Order, but more into like cryptozoology. A lot of people claim to have seen what looked like the remains of literally like an old Jurassic era pterodactyl, the remains of it photographed in the final stages of the American Civil War.
I've seen that photograph that's supposed to float around. Yeah.
Well, it's been pinned against some barn doors. Now there are a couple of reproductions of it you can find online. Now hundreds of people claim to have seen the original picture in the 1960s in one of these older magazines like Saga and things like that, Fate or whatever. But today, nobody can find the picture. You can find quite a few recreations of the picture online, and they're made to look brownish, the photograph to look old and whatever. But no one can find the magazine which the picture was in. And, the entire articles you can find, if you just type in missing Thunderbird photograph, you'll find all number of articles, and that's sort of like a perfect example of having numerous people having clear memories of a specific photograph in a magazine, and now no one can find it anywhere. It is admittedly weird.
I wonder if that leads back into the net neutrality being revoked, and the powers that be giving what they think, the little bit they think we need, as opposed to what we want to know about and are trying to investigate.
Or, the other theory, which is sort of, again, down conspiracy pathways, is the idea that we really are living in some sort of like a matrix world where, the controllers tweak and manipulate reality, and, like in the movie, the Matrix, where when there's a glitch in the Matrix, it's what causes deja vu, so maybe, we are living in some sort of virtual reality world that's so advanced that it's almost indistinguishable from what reality actually is, I mean, it's like, there's like another line in the Matrix where one of the characters, I think, I forget which one it is now, but, he says to Neo, Keanu Reeves' character, have you ever had such a vivid dream that if you hadn't woken up, you would not have known you were asleep, And we've all had these dreams that seem so real, and then you wake up, oh, thank God for that, it was just a dream, But you imagine if you'd never woke up, you would actually think you were awake. And so, again, that sort of impacts on the nature of reality. I mean, I think we've all had dreams as well where you see somebody in a dream, but you don't know who they are. It's kind of like, how can you create someone in a dream who you don't know? Where did their image come from? So there's a lot of things, in relation to reality and unreality that I think goes beyond just, your mind's a bit forgetful or, you made a mistake on this. I think that there is something to be said about that reality can kind of get blurred in some ways that we really don't understand.
Well, and I think that is very true. But I would like to think if I was going to create an alternate virtual reality for myself, it'd be a hell of a lot different than what I'm freaking living. I would put myself somewhere different. For God's
I wouldn't pick
sake.
this one for myself.
Yeah, it's like holy hell. There has to be something. But I don't want to digress too much. I had to ask that as we were talking.
Oh no, that's all right. No, it's an interesting concept. The idea of what actually defines reality.
So now I'm gonna piggyback off of that to a different. And this is an actual conspiracy theory that's in the book. It's one we've talked with other guests about, but I'm going to take it to a slightly different level. You talk about chemtrails. Chemtrails are contrails, condensation trails off of airplanes as they fly, and I'm not going to go into the definition, but it's basically flying at such high altitudes, the condensation crystallizes and it forms those white streaks that we see for a fleeting few seconds in the sky. Chemtrails are what have been dubbed by conspiracy theorists as chemical trails that are being sprayed in the upper atmosphere, which is why they are lasting longer, they are wider, they are bigger, they stay in the skies longer. And the theory is that those are chemicals are being dispersed into the upper atmosphere, they're raining down on us, and we're inhaling them and ingesting them, basically. Now, I want to take this to a level we've never talked about on this show, but I do think in light of a lot of things that have been happening recently, we've had shootings and very violent acts recently, and people are saying there's no cause, there's no explanation, we saw no warning signs. Is it possible that what we're saying, like with the Las Vegas shooting, with other things where that people are coming out of the woodworks, they're committing violent acts, is it possible that we are reacting to chemicals that are being dispersed in the air?
Well, I have to admit, I haven't heard that particular theory for these sort of mass shootings, but I have heard, kind of alternative theories for these sort of mass shootings that go beyond just somebody being deranged, or eccentric, or crazy. The idea of sort of mind control and things like this, which are realities, but I've got to admit, I haven't heard that one particularly, for the chemtrails thing. I mean, the chemtrail section I have in the book is written like a lot of the ones are. It's a controversial theory, so what I do is I approach it by providing the reader with both sides of the coin, the idea that these just are, they're just regular contrails, versus why somebody else thinks, they are something dangerous. I mean, the primary theory with chemtrails is that, there's a global elite which wants to significantly and massively lower the population and the world's population, and they're doing so in various ways, sort of obesity, ill health, chemtrails, and put all those together to the point where, the death rate starts to go up at a steady rate. But, I mean, one of the things I would say about a lot of these shooters, regardless of, whether you think it could be down to chemtrails or mind control, whatever, some of them did seem to be the kind of people who just out the blue did these things,
Snap.
Yes, some of them, the background was kind of controversial and weird or whatever, but some of them, there was no real inkling at all as to why this would happen.
Right.
So, I do find that kind of, odd that some of these people, at first glance at least, did not seem crazy people. Now, some of them did, obviously, but others, it was almost, people were just blindsided. They just couldn't understand it,
Well, and I think, I was, as you were talking, do you remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, some of the first shootings were taking place in post offices. Mailmen seemed to be going crazy, and and people started talking about going postal, quote unquote. You would go postal,
right?
Because mild-mannered postmen, mailmen, delivering, and then all of a sudden they go crazy and they start shooting people. Well, it's like we've taken that to a different level now. And you're right. No one has brought chemtrails and some of the mass shootings together. I'm actually going to take credit for that. If you choose to write a book about it, Nick, I would simply like to be able to say inspired by an interview with Mystic Moon Cafe, something like that. But
going to put you on the royalties.
Yeah, mailbox checks are good. I'll just walk in. Wendy and I both can handle that. We're okay with that. I sold out my integrity a long time ago. I know what my integrity's worth. So,
hey, we'll write for work or money.
Exactly. No, but looking at it, there does seem to be a build-up, a slow progression. It started out, possibly, mail workers. Okay, well, in the early 2000s, there was anthrax being sent in the mail. Being sent to Congress and the Senate. Well, what if other shit was being sent in the mail years ago, and these mailmen were they were ingesting, they were inhaling it, and that was what was causing them to go off.
Or the skin contact.
Skin contact, exactly. And then you've got, like, I go back to the Las Vegas shooting because that did just seem to kind of come out of nowhere. Somewhat. I've been to Las Vegas. I had an office in Las Vegas. I have stayed in many of the hotels. My profile picture on Facebook is taken from the Mandalay Bay. It's taken from the founder's room on Mandalay Bay. You are hard pressed to get a Pez dispenser in there without security checking it. Being able to get basically a small militia
arsenal,
arsenal there is something, So there's a lot of gaping holes, a lot of questions here. People that seemed for no reason, and as far as I have seen in mainstream media, they still don't have a reason for why this guy did this, and this was just a random act. Is it possible that these chemtrails are altering our personalities? They're making us more aggressive so that there can be a call for a ban on martial law, a ban on the Second Amendment right, those types of things. I am going out on a limb here, but we're talking about conspiracy theories and the New World Order, so I don't really think anything's off the table.
No, and I mean, actually, it's a good point you make about, certain groups of people. I'll tell you for why. Because back in the 1980s, when President Reagan was envisaging this whole Star Wars defense system, to try and knock out incoming Soviet atomic missiles, the idea there would be these laser weapons in space, and it was called the Strategic Defense Initiative, but it was known as Star Wars, and it wasn't as advanced as we all hoped. Otherwise, we'd be using it now. But what's interesting, a lot of the work on the SDI program, even though it's American, a lot of the work was contracted out to an English company called Marconi, and between 1984 and 1991. 33 scientists and technicians either died, committed suicide, vanished, were murdered under really weird circumstances. I mean, just bizarre situations where, people took their lives when they're just happily munching their cornflakes and, in the morning, just an hour earlier or whatever. And there was a big British government inquiry, were these people being mind controlled? Were they being targeted by like microwave technology? All sorts of stuff. Then in the early 2000s, just after 9/11, there was a spate of microbiologists, people, who's experts in the field of viruses and things like this. Many of them who were working, in tandem with government agencies, intelligence agencies. Dozens of microbiologists died in very similar circumstances to the Marconi scientists in the UK. But this was worldwide, and particularly in the US, where you had microbiologists jumping off bridges, slashing their wrists, going in the garage and, hooking a hose to the exhaust pipe and killing themselves. All sorts of weird stuff was going on. And you had these, but it was specific groups of people, like I said, the Marconi scientists, the microbiologists, and you do have to wonder, in light of all that, I mean, are certain groups being targeted for assassination, making it look like something else, or are some of these people literally being driven crazy, via mind control technology? I mean, a good example, didn't cause anybody to kill anybody else or themselves, fortunately, but you had this story, if you remember, coming out of Cuba just a few months ago, with these stories of these low-frequency sound weapons being directed at the American embassy there, and people getting dizziness and feeling, sort of antsy and panic attack-like. And those low-frequency weapons can do that. They can get you into like a state of a panic attack. Because it has an effect on the nervous system, but you don't recognize what's doing it because it's a low-frequency weapon that's targeted at you. So it's not impossible that, technology does exist to affect and alter how the human mind and the brain and our tempers and, can be altered. That is a fact. And it's not an alternative fact, it's just a fact.
Unless otherwise reported by fake news, it is not an alternative fact. No, go.
Oh, okay. I've seen, teasers about the government going and doing biological warfare simulations on some Native American Indian land, or school, I believe, maybe down in Oklahoma. Just nothing surprises me anymore about it. But maybe they've already been doing it, and this is just somebody deciding to come out in the open and start it up.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was actually something like this in England many years ago, and fortunately it didn't involve any sort of a real weapon, but plans were undertaken basically on the London Underground, where non-lethal or non-dangerous aerosols, chemicals in aerosols, were released in the London Underground to see how a dispersal could actually occur, in a real-world situation. And the files didn't surface, until years later. As to how the government had, it was essentially using the general public going to work on the London Underground rail system, which everybody uses in London because the streets are so busy. There's nowhere to park, so people use the Underground, and so they were testing how easy or hard it would be, for whatever reason, to disperse, a chemical aerosol, if you like, throughout the tunnels. So, but it's no different to a lot of the mind control experiments that have gone on over the years. The Russians, the Chinese, type. Everybody's done it. Yeah, like MK Ultra is probably the most well-known one of all. But
definitely,
throughout the world, there's been dozens of countries have addressed the issue of creating sort of real-life Manchurian candidates, hypnotized assassins, truth serums, that kind of thing. I mean, all of this kind of comes into play when you talk about mind control and manipulation.
Indeed, it's not all fire starter. It's all kinds of different controls and just diabolical conspiracy theories. Yeah.
They just keep growing and exponentially, as a matter of fact.
How rude, right?
I love the fact that I inspired Nick Redfern with a conspiracy theory. Oh, well, and honestly, I'd say mine has been born out of the conversations we've had with Bill Bean, and Bill being very, to the right of the spectrum when it comes to conservatism and religion and conspiracy theories. And it just seems to me just from a news standpoint, as I look at the news on a regular basis in my day job, managing radio stations and looking at the news that comes across my desk, I'm going, we seem to be getting more aggressive. We seem to be getting angrier. We seem to be doing much more random acts of violence than I know that humanity, we as mankind are capable of so much evil, but we're also capable of so much good. We are capable of so much good, but it seems to be like the random acts of violence are proliferating
over like the last 6-8 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Kansas City has become one of the most violent places in the United States, and travel advisories are being put out to not travel to Missouri, period.
Yep.
Wow.
Dude, do I stay or do I run? Or do I become one of the problems?
Well, there's no doubt. I think you're right, that the world is becoming more dangerous and more violent. And I think part of it is just, people's frustrations, sometimes over things that aren't real, but they're led to believe are real,
Yes.
Why do, this have to be like this when actually it doesn't have to be like that, and I think there's also the fact that, there's so many rules and regulations in today's world compared to even just 20 years ago. Like I said about, me as a little kid riding my bike around town, if my next door neighbour let their kids ride around town at 8 o'clock, that child services would come round and take them off the parents, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it's kind of like there's this frustration that why do we have to live in a world filled with so many rules and regulations that aren't necessarily all real? I get it. We do live in a dangerous world. I get that. But, if your kids are in view and they want to ride their bike up and down the street and you can see them, that's not the worst thing on the planet, No. And I think also just the issues of, I tell you, one of the things that really annoys everybody, and it really, massively annoys me, is why is it you cannot phone, your phone provider or whatever? Why have we always got to go through, a robot or press one for this or two for that?
Yep.
I mean, if they did away with all that and employed real people,
back to the human factor,
employment would be out the window.
Oh, absolutely.
But the problem, I mean, I think, when it says, which department do you want to be put through, and do you want to speak to somebody about this or that? And, it said press button 1, press button 2, or you can ask me real questions, Well, I want to speak to a person. Well,
right, me too.
Can you please say that again, sir? And I think that all of that kind of all that kind of stuff, grates on people, and you add that to this and to something else, and traffic jams on the streets, and everybody's racing to get to work, and I think a lot of it comes down to the fast pace of life compared to, like I said, 20 years ago when things were quite different, and I think. Yes. It's kind of, it is like a kettle going off the boil, that sometimes people are just itching for a way to alleviate their frustrations or anger, so, it clashes in a fight or whatever, so.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's look at. Let's see. What can I choose here? I don't know really how to. I don't know how to segue off of that. I mean, we detoured and took this. Took this. Okay. Let's look at this. Let's. We've talked about. The current pop culture and things like that. You do list in your book that about 6 different topics related to President Donald Trump and his speeches and his reference to the New World Order and his approach to the New World Order, and especially today, making a public declaration veering far off course from presidents of past decades, naming Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, moving the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I mean, this all plays into New World Order conspiracies, does it not?
Well, yeah, it does. And I mean, again, this is the kind of thing we see on the news now. There are people who are for President Trump and the people against him, and somebody will have a theory that, it's for this reason, somebody else, it's a theory for that reason. And again, I think, it polarizes people into different camps, and when you polarize people, they're looking for answers as to why do you think it's this and why I think it's that, and I think that kind of nurtures sometimes conspiracy theories that are there sometimes, and also it kind of causes conspiracy theories that aren't there. I mean, for example, one of the things I talk about in the book was with Vladimir Putin, when he was warning that there was this sort of secret cabal, that was that wouldn't allow Trump to be elected. I mean, most people can probably remember that, when he made that statement. And then, of course, people were saying, well, what does he know that we don't know? Or, other people were saying, well, this is just like mind manipulation done by the Russians to destabilize, the U.S., thinking that they don't have freedom anymore because somebody else is pulling the strings. So, again, this is one of the things that happens. You get so many different theories and accounts from people like Putin, and then you think, and as I said, people did think, well, what does this mean? Are we sort of slaves to some secret group that operates so deeply and so powerfully that it can actually, decide who's going to win an election or whatever? So, there's no doubt that there's been a lot of, talk. I mean, we all know how much talk there's been about influences on elections and things like this. And again, you have people who say, well, yes, it was all influence. Other people who say, it's not as extreme as people have suggested. And I think this is why people also get some people sort of ignore the New World Order stuff, because when you look at it, sometimes there really are, 2 or 3 or 4 different theories for one particular issue, and that's why people get so, sort of numbed out by it all, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Even I do at times.
Well, you would have to. It's kind of like overkill. It's like sensory overload. It's like, oh my God, I can't handle any more of this.
Well, that's why I like to actually jump from one book to a totally different subject. Got doing the New World Order book, and the next one that comes out in February is all about the Slender Man, which is as far removed from the New World Order as you could possibly imagine.
Or
which is good.
Is it? Yeah.
Or is it? Yeah, maybe there is a conspiracy.
Two new World Order conspiracies: chemtrails and mass shootings and Slender Man. We have to find a way to put those into the revised edition. Talking, and this freaks Wendy out. She said she thinks that the government's listening to our podcast, but I mean, you talk about 2 speeches in particular that President Trump has given, and that he talks about the New World Order, as did several presidents preceding him: George Bush Sr., George W. Bush, Clinton, Ronald Reagan especially talked about the New World Order. All of these individuals laying a foundation for a new vision. But President Trump seems to be the one that is more hell bent on saying, I'm going to do things my way. And do you think that has more people concerned that he might be more of a pawn for the New World Order to bring a shakeup to the established DC Beltway?
Well, I mean, this is where you kind of get to the crux of the term New World Order, because you mentioned several different presidents who've used that term, but you can actually look at them from different perspectives. I mean, Bill Clinton, if you look at some of his, it was talking more about hopefully like a beneficial future, nothing particularly sinister. Now, President George W. Bush, in the first Gulf War in 1990, that the term New World Order was sort of, put out there as well, and that was more from from the perspective of, let's influence different countries and change things, etc. And some people saw that as a good thing. Other people saw it as a sinister thing, sort of manipulative. And I think, whether it's President Trump, whether it was, President Reagan, the term New World Order can very much take on different meanings for different presidents based on, the current affairs of that particular era. And so for that reason, it's important to sort of, I guess, study, the ideology of all the, the various people who in power who've, comment. And like, for example, in England, Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, he talked about, creating a new world order. And, I think, it's also, I think with Blair, it was, he was sort of putting that out to see what the reaction was. It was put into his speech deliberately to sort of see, what the media response would be to somebody like Blair bringing up the issue of a new world order, regardless of what he actually meant by it.
And what was the response when he brought that word up, when he used that term?
Well, it was exactly as I thought most people would think. You had divisions of people. For example, a lot of all the English newspapers, they obviously have not just the newspapers, but, huge websites online as well. And you can go into the comment sections to his speech where some people were saying, Blair's part of this plot to enslave the world. Other people were saying, no, he's talking about just trying to find a way to make the world better. And again, that's what a lot of the New World Order theories come down to. You have people who view the nature of the New World Order concept as being threatening and, sort of having us all in shackles and chains. And then you have other people who view it as a positive future, but with a term, New World Order, that has sort of controversial connotations attached to it. So, again, it's like sort of sitting in a bar with your friends and debating on this or that. That's what a lot of it does come down to. It's, different people having different views as a result of how they interpret, the goals that various politicians might be outlining for the future.
And they all do have a plan for the future.
Well, yeah, everybody has a plan, I guess it's, but sometimes it's, things change as they go along. I mean, like, for example, we didn't foresee 9/11 and, the whole, like the Patriot Act and things like that coming in. And I mean, like, if you look at, for example, this is a perfect classic example, someone like Edward Snowden. Now, for some people, Edward Snowden is an American hero. For other people, Edward Snowden is one of the most notorious traitors. And then there are other people who don't know what to think. But, on the one side, you have people who say, well, he put everybody in jeopardy by releasing this or that. Other people say he demonstrated how much surveillance there is of, like, our iPhones, iPads, laptops, etc. And so people are in kind of a conflict as to, well, what was he really? Yes, he revealed all this stuff, but, should he have? So that's the big debate. And this all kind of ties in with this angle of what does the NWO actually mean? What does it imply? And I think with Snowden, he demonstrated how massively the world has changed with just gigantic levels of surveillance, which has placed us in sort of a new world order. But then on the other side of the coin, you'll have people who will earnestly and honestly, from their perspective, say, well, I think, this is a good thing because it's going to protect us. But then other people will say, well, yeah, we need protecting, but does some old lady living in a little town in Wisconsin really need her phone numbers collected? So there's this legitimate debate going on, which I think should apply to the New World Order as well. We should have a legitimate debate, on the future and how we can have a great future and protect ourselves, and do so in a way that doesn't impact on our privacy and our freedoms, but does achieve the right goals, and I think we need that kind of balance, and many people who look into the New World Order don't see balance. They see extremes of one thing or the other.
Well, it's all about checks and balances. Mm-hmm. But one of the things, and I admit this very, very readily, 3 years ago I was hosting a radio show separate and apart from the one that Wendy and I co-host, and it was with a client that I now have that's running a congressional campaign in Virginia, and we were dealing with pop culture topics specifically related to politics, and we got into the Trayvon Martin shooting, and we got into the police brutality and Blue Lives Matter and things like that. And I come from a family of law enforcement. My mother's family are all law enforcement. They were sheriffs and deputies and town police, and they're now DOC, Department of Corrections. But my take is wearing a badge doesn't make you mentally fit. And I do think that many times individuals wear a badge and they are not given the correct mental evaluations that they need before they get that badge. They go through the gun training, they go through the safety training, they go through but they are not given the serious mental competent evaluations that they need to be given. So I don't think necessarily that just because someone is wearing a badge, they are always right. And we got into that conversation, and then that got into the Second Amendment conversation. And I made a statement 3 years ago. I said, I don't think that this country will ever see the Second Amendment really seriously challenged. Now, that was 3 years ago. I am at the point right now that I'm going, you know what? We actually are coming upon with more and more random acts. We actually may see that Second Amendment right challenged to the point that gun rights are taken away. So it is about checks and balances, but at some point, where do we start going? Being protected on a grand scheme doesn't protect us as individuals. Where does the greater good and the good of the individual, where is that line drawn? And I think that's a hard. I'm not asking you to define that for us. I wouldn't do that.
Like you were.
No. That was more of a rhetorical question. I'm just saying that was the question that I was asking. At what point do we as people sit up and go, do I want the government protecting me, or do I want to protect myself, or vice versa?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that. Within the New World Order research field, there's an entire subculture that, fully believes that everybody's weapons are going to be confiscated. That's actually, like a sub aspect of the NWO research. And then you have other people who say, we'd be better off if nobody had them. Now, the problem, of course, it's like, we can argue forever and a day as to whether guns make us safer or not. One thing I can say for sure, when everybody's already got the guns, there's no way they could be rounded up.
Rounded up, right.
It's just not possible. In a country of about 330 million, I don't know how many have guns, but I mean, even if it was 100 million guns or 150 million guns, there's just no way to round them up, and people aren't going to just willingly give them up, No. But then on the other side of the coin, you have, you have a situation where some nations where there aren't guns or very few guns, and they get along fine. I mean, for example, Japan. I don't know if you know this. There was this major, it might seem bizarre to us, but there was like a major news coverage when the number of shootings in 1 year in Japan rose to 16. Not 16,000.
Right, 16.
Yeah, 16 fatal shootings, and it was like major news. I'm originally from England. I'd never touched a gun before, I moved to the US.
And now you live in Texas. Everybody has.
I live in Texas.
Everyone.
But it's different. It's like nobody's wrong or right. It's just different cultures.
Exactly.
But I think a lot of the things that impact on the New World Order theories, like gun control, again, it's one of these things where everybody has an opinion, and there's no medium. There's no middle ground. It's either this or it's that, and that's why. And I think a lot of people are legitimately worried that their weapons are going to be taken away from them. Other people take the view that they prefer if nobody would have them. Well, if nobody had them, then in theory there would be no gun crime. But that's impossible. It's like it's kind of like. It's already happened. Like I said, the horse has bolted. I mean, there's nothing you can do. The only thing I would say that could help, and I think would benefit everybody, would if there wasn't sort of like a glorification of guns. I've got a gun, so I'm a badass. If you've got a gun to protect yourself from some junkie who breaks in and who needs money because feed his heroin addiction, and he breaks in at 3 a.m. and he's in your bedroom and you wake up, and you shoot him, well, that's his fault. That's the way I look at it. I don't have any sympathy.
He's there to do harm, period.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if you put a bullet in his head,
you're justified.
And he's in your house at 3 a.m. and you feel threatened, nobody with common sense would have a problem with that. But
Absolutely.
I think, the idea of, glorifying guns and making them seem cool and, look at me, I've got this and I've got that.
Like all of the movies these days.
Yeah, I think if people saw guns as something to protect themselves legitimately, rather than something that was, they can
symbol.
Show off to the buddies and say, let's blow some whatever up, and I think the glorification kind of encourages, people to want more, and something better and badder looking,
No, and we've had the conversation on this show with other guests. I think when we, I've been playing devil's advocate on the conspiracy theory about gun violence and things like that. But the fact of the matter is, what we're talking about here is, in many instances, is mental illness. And if you've got someone who is hell-bent on causing damage, it doesn't matter what they use, they will cause damage.
Exactly.
If you've got someone who wants to kill, they'll find a way to kill. If it's a gun, if it's a knife, if it's an explosive, it's a poison, it doesn't matter. If they want to kill somebody, if they want to cause harm, they will find a way to do so.
Yeah, I mean, you'll never stop. It's nobody's sort of infallible in terms of being 100% safe 100% of the time. It's just I mean, you look at presidential attacks, that kind of thing. President Kennedy, Martin Luther King, President Reagan, John Lennon. I mean, unfortunately, if somebody wants to get close to someone and kill someone, it's if it's
they'll
last minute thing, it is really difficult to stop that kind of thing from happening.
Well, it was funny you were talking about when the shootings got to 16 in Japan in the news. Yeah, but they didn't talk about the samurai attacks, the samurai sword attacks, because I know I'm being facetious when we made this. I am. Because it's more commonplace to have knives, swords, that types of things in the culture than it is to have a gun.
Yeah.
You give someone a gun who's never seen a gun, they're going to shoot someone or something just out of accident and happen, and yeah, they're going to be holding it. And I mean, hell, you give and this is not any type of ethnic or race. You give a monkey a gun, it's going to shoot somebody or something because it's in
its hands and it's
in its hands and it's never had one before. It's going to shoot something and it's going to shoot someone. You introduce guns to an environment that are not used to guns, somebody's going to get shot. It's all fun and games till somebody gets shot in the leg.
Yeah, you're right. And again, it's all, this is, a lot of the debates around things like the New World Order. People say, well, they're pushing somebody's orchestrating these mass killings as a means to take away our weapons. But then again, it could just be a lot, crazy people shooting a bunch of other people up, and then somebody says, well, we've got to change the gun laws. So, you can look at it from the conspiracy angle. You can also look at it from the more down-to-earth example, but the end process would be very similar, sort of new legislation on guns, but one person sees a conspiracy in it, another person sees it as a trend in society,
And either way,
absolutely.
Though, either way, you're taking the guns away from the law-abiding citizens while the criminals maintain theirs.
Yeah, the outcome is the same. Yeah, the outcome's actually the same. Yeah,
exactly. Well, we saw that in this country with prohibition. We're going to outlaw. We're going to outlaw alcohol, and that's going to make everything better. Well, hell, no, it didn't make everything better. It made things a shitload worse.
Well, the mafia came into play then, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it did. It made it miserable. The only people and it made the mafia wealthy, and it gave them control. So it's like, if this country would legalize marijuana, it would be great across the board for so many reasons. The agricultural areas of this country would be better off. They could raise it. They could legalize it. They could charge taxes on it. I mean, it would make it a much more feasible way to control things than by saying, "Oh no, everything is illegal. We're going to, you can't even grow hemp in this country."
Everything natural is illegal.
Exactly.
Does that bring us back around to pharmaceutical companies?
It does bring us back around to pharmaceutical companies. It's easier.
And plus, also, if it was legalized, you'd have massive profits in the sales of chips as well.
Exactly.
Everybody's just crashed out.
Yeah. It does. I mean,
yes, indeed.
And everything that we're talking about does play into the fact. I mean, in some form or fashion. Now, I have to ask you that. I'm digressing again. I have to ask you, Nick. I mean, you are from the UK, one of the wealthiest, families, dynasties, the British royal family. What is the take on a new world order and a world ruled society like in the UK?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of misperceptions about the British royal family. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of the royal family at all, and I'll explain why. Because in the UK, we have a prime minister, in which basically the prime minister is the equivalent of a US president. There's no difference. So that the royal family don't actually run the country. They did centuries ago, but today they're more just like a status symbol. They bring in a lot of money through tourism. I mean, billions per year, literally billions, not millions. And people flock to London and they like to see, the guards in their red outfits and the big hats and everything else, and go to see Buckingham Palace and see the Queen waving out the window or whatever. But, they really are, like today, they're just sort of like a traditional part of the UK, that's because of the traditions, they don't want to change them. But the royal family doesn't actually make, the rules, etc. I mean, they do have to pass, like, the decrees and the orders, but it's basically a token thing because it's the government, that creates the laws of employment or crime or whatever, and the Queen just signs off on it. So, I think that in terms of government, things should remain as they are with an elected prime minister in the same way we have a president over here. If people like the royal family, well, that's fine. I don't see them going away any time now, but I just don't see them as anything other than, a tourist attraction. And if the British government's fine, using them as a tourist attraction, that's okay as well, I guess. But there have been stories, sort of linking the royals with ancient societies and shadowy groups, and certainly that reached its peak when Princess Diana got killed. There were a lot of these rumors of assassinations or sacrifices to secret societies and ancient groups, and that it was all set up. Whether it was or not, that's another question. But certainly, I was living in the UK then. I well remember a lot of stories about, powerful, shadowy figures in the royal family and the intelligence community working together to get rid of Diana. And then there are all these weird stories that she was sacrificed to these Diana-based cults. Really weird stuff. So,
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Good heavens, that's a whole nother bunch of conspiracy theories.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is, but I mean, that is an ongoing, especially with, in light of the recent royal marriages. I mean, that is kind of coming back into the limelight again.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the one good thing I would say about the current royals, what I like about William and Harry is that they are very down to earth. Now, when Princess Diana got killed, and up until that point, the royals were very much, we're the royals and you're just the lowly peasants, And there was this very big space, between everybody else and the royals, and they weren't seen as approachable. They weren't seen as people who, you could talk to, and they didn't want to talk to us. But what I would say is that certainly Harry and William and Kate have definitely, sort of lowered those barriers, and I think they recognised, they sort of followed in the path that their mother wanted to go, Diana, where, yes, it would still be a royal family, but they would, the general public, the people, would feel that they were with them as well, rather than having to put up with the lowly peasants, as how, people kind of thought the royals saw us all, and I think a lot of them did. So I think, good luck to them in that sense. I hope, things work out, for all of them.
I was going to say, yeah.
I don't hate them or anything like that. I think if they can help do stuff rather than just be this image of like an old antique kind of thing. If they can bring things into the modern world, be progressive, and I think Harry and William are doing that, and when they go outside and greet the public, it's not just a wave of a hand and they're gone. They hang out and talk on the same level, and I think that's a good thing. So, hopefully that trend will continue. So.
Well, I mean, hell, marriage is hard enough on you without being a royal.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
It has its own problems. It really does. I mean, that's a conspiracy theory in and of itself. There's so much we have not even touched on in the book. I mean, we did digress. I apologize. There were just.
I didn't apologize. We covered a lot. So.
We did. But there are so many things in the constructs of a new world order that are so intriguing. You mentioned Project Bluebeam, and the reason that I come back to that is Bill Bean, who is one of our regular guests, has also mentioned that. Again, Bill is far right-wing conservative evangelical Christian. He deals with it from the coming of the Antichrist and a new world order. You mentioned it, and it does play prominently in the book. I would like to have you touch on it just a little bit, kind of as a more objective approach to Project Bluebeam.
Well, yeah, I mean, in theory, the idea of Project Bluebeam, for people who don't know, is the idea of this small group, like an elite group of military intelligence, scientists, etc., all coming together and creating like a faked invasion. Now, some people take the view that Project Bluebeam will be like the faked alien invasion, and there'll be specific, highly advanced craft built, and flown over our cities, and people will believe that they are alien spacecraft, but they might have been sort of built and flown out of Area 51 or something, and so the theory is that people, governments will say the aliens are invading, to keep stability, we're going to invoke martial law and national emergency laws for the foreseeable future. And it would be a way to put us under like an iron-fisted world, but it would all be like fake. It would not be real. It would just be like, a ruse. Now, the other angle of it is the one that I think Bill's talking about more, where they're talking about this other aspect of Project Bluebeam, where you'll all around the world you'll have sort of different gods and deities, holographic images of them broadcasted all around the world, and people will really believe they're seeing Jesus or they're seeing Buddha or whoever, and they'll be using highly advanced acoustic technology, and people will hear the messages, etc. But then it will all come crashing down, and then with the rise of yet another character, which would be the Antichrist, or the fake Antichrist, who would be put in place, just be a regular guy, but he would be presented as the Antichrist.
He's already there, isn't he? With an orange tint to his skin and everything.
But it's one of these situations where what it comes down to is basically holograms creating fake scenarios which can result in the sudden instigation of national security laws and martial law and curfews. So they're actually sort of different parallels and aspects to Project Bluebeam. And some people think, Bluebeam is like an umbrella program for several sub-projects. One of them may be the alien invasion, one may be the more religious-based one, etc., etc. But of course the big question is, to what extent the technology could successfully be utilized without one single thing going wrong. You'd only need one of these craft, these UFOs to fall out of the sky and the public to get there first, and they find that it's not filled with little grey men with big black eyes, but it's actually filled with guys in military outfits, then the whole thing would the whistle would have been blown, So that's one of the big questions: is could the ruse, could the plan actually be achieved with 100% success? Because that's what it would need. It would only need 0.1 of 1% to go wrong for the whole thing to spill out as the fake that it actually would be,
Mm-hmm.
Then again, the factor of terrified citizens, mobbing, going into mob scenarios. Golly, that's all too real as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you only need to get a few people in a panic, before it's everybody's sort of rampaging around, grabbing food and and water, and just it's easy to see how
killing and fighting and. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's easy to see how what happens. It's when people panic. That's when it starts to go wrong, and people they just panic. They just
lose their minds.
Spirals out of control. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. And I think there would be a lot of that to it as well. People would just be in that mode of, oh my God, what are we going to do? I mean, it's kind of like the whole situation with things, like dirty bombs and fears of, nuclear attacks and that kind of thing from North Korea.
Right.
There are, it's one of these situations where, I mean, it's a genuine threat, but on the other hand, people are already, I mean, I've heard of people who are already sort of stocking up,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm. Got their bunkers.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's nobody kind of can predict in these sort of really alternative scenarios that might actually be real. Nobody can really predict what the outcome would really be, and where it would all lead. So.
Now, I have two questions. One of those piggybacking on Project Bluebeam. but it goes back to some of the cryptozoological works that you've done. Is it possible that the sightings that people have had of these entities, these cryptids, could be Project Bluebeam?
Well, I guess it's possible. I mean, there are actually some stories of some of these so-called cryptids, like, the chupacabra, Bigfoot. There are actually some stories of these creatures sort of vanishing in the flash of light or just winking out of existence. There are reports of some of the, the Men in Black, not like the movie versions, but the real versions, which are much creepier, where they've been sort of one-dimensional, like a shadow, like a projection. So, it's not impossible. I'd never really actually thought about that one before, but, it's one of those situations where there are... I mean, I'll give you an example. It is not sort of related to cryptids, but in the early 1960s, a U.S. military guy named Major General Edward Lansdale, he came up with a plan to project pictures of Jesus on clouds over Cuba and have microphones and loudspeakers claiming to be the voice of Jesus and saying, you need to oust Fidel Castro. That's a true story. So,
wow.
That was a very simple plan. The technology wasn't up to it, and it all fell apart. In theory and on paper, it was all good, but in reality, it was just too much of a pipe dream. But that's a true story of Edward Lansdale and the voice of Jesus and the megaphones, etc. So, in other words, this kind of thing actually has been attempted. Whether it's been done with cryptids, I don't know. But certainly has been attempted or thought about being done long before the Bluebeam rumours came along. So in that sense, I guess all things potentially are possible.
My second question is, you've been researching governmental conspiracies for a long time. Do you see the actual potential among worldwide governments to work coinciding with one another to bring about a literal global conspiracy and a one world government?
Yes, I think it could be achieved. It would just depend, I guess, on how it would be achieved and how long it would take. I mean, if you look at things today, pretty much everybody accepts that we're all being watched some way or another, whether it's through your iPhone, through your smart TV, through your laptop, you name it. People accept it's happening. But there's no jackbooted soldiers knocking our doors down to make it happen. It's like people just accept that it's happening, And so, in other words, we could actually slide into like a 1984 George Orwell kind of world without any kind of bullets and guns and, like I said, jackbooted people, whatever. We could slide into it without realizing it. I mean, if 30 years ago somebody had said, 30 years from now, everybody's cell phone numbers, well, they wouldn't even know what cell phones were then, but I mean, so everybody's phones, everybody's computers, whatever, were being watched. You would say, no, that's nonsense. We would never allow that to happen.
Right.
And yet it has happened.
It has. Yeah.
But my point, though, is that is kind of like a New World Order situation, but we've slid into it with no attempt on any part of ruthless organisation to make it happen. And I think the dangerous thing is we could slide into a New World Order just in the exact same way that we've slid into accepting that we're being listened to. Right. And so it becomes, the scary thing is, each aspect of the New World Order potentially could become acceptable to the people of that era, in the same way that 30 years from now, people may really have tracking devices in their arm or something, which contains all your information, whether it's, I don't know, your password to whatever the 30 years from now version of Facebook is, It's got your bank account information in there. It's got all your medical history. It records everything, from when you did, speeding ticket or whatever. for us, that would be a nightmare. For the people 30 years from now, maybe they won't have been forced into it, like in a New World Order scenario that we expect. They may have just been told, well, this is why it's going to be good for you, or you just accept it in the same way we've accepted certain things. So I do think we could have a New World Order, but unlike a lot of people who think it's going to involve curfews, you know, and our freedoms taken away, you know, by people knocking on the front doors and stealing our guns or whatever. It could just come in the way it is right now, just a slow, steady process, which slightly gets a little bit worse every year, but people say, well, what can we do about it? And so after 10 years, everything looks totally different. And I think that's how we could get into a New World Order situation, far more likely than having us versus the troops on the streets, which is the other alternative, but I think that's less likely, you know.
Well, you know, going back to the analogy that I was drawing on earlier, growing up in a Christian, evangelical Christian home, one of the, illustrations that ministers would often use talking about the New World Order, or talking about, you know, a life of sin in general, was the way that we become accustomed to it. And one of the analogies that they would use, it was a minister from up north, and he was talking about he loved lobster. And he's like, the problem is you can't take a live lobster and dump it in boiling water. He said it'll fight its way out if you dump a live lobster into boiling water. He said, but if you take a live lobster and you put it in a cooker of lukewarm water, and then you slowly raise the temperature, inch by inch, degree by degree, he said it will eventually boil alive, and it doesn't even know it. And then you can enjoy a nice broiled Maine lobster tail. He said, but you can't just dump a live one into hot water because it will fight its way out. And I think that's very true. You can't dump a society into a New World Order because
people will rise up. Yeah. Yeah,
we'll rise up. There'll be a fight. There'll be, you know, there'll be some type of confrontation. However, if you slowly,
conditions to it,
basically condition and accustomize us to something, we don't have any. We don't fight because it just becomes the norm.
Yep, and that's the big danger. That's, you know, where 100 years from now, there may not be any freedoms, not because they've been taken away from us by, you know, some equivalent of Nazi stormtroopers, but just because, you know, one freedom gets taken away, another one gets taken away, until there just aren't any more freedoms, you know, but they've just been slowly removed, you know.
Slowly chipped away and gotten rid of. And that's why I keep saying, you know, telling people, ask a fucking question. Ask something. I mean, you know, question. Don't just
stand up for something.
Exactly.
Then again, you know, I mean, there is the fact that, I mean, if you look over, certainly over the last 2 years, the mass demonstrations there's been, particularly around the US, you know, for various causes, and people have come out in their hundreds of thousands, you know.
But then the government takes the military mob precautions, or not precautions, but tactics against these peaceful protesters. So they are doing it. I mean, honestly, if you sit down and look at it, oh my God, they are. They're taking the rights away, right and left.
Mm-hmm. And we're letting them.
I don't know about letting, but yeah, it's happening anyway.
I mean, we're not doing.
Can't stop it.
No. Well, but we should be able to.
We should be able to. Yes.
I mean, honestly, in this country, it is a government by the people, for the people, of the people. But we've forgotten that.
Well, I think also one of the problems that, to a degree, sort of common sense has gone out of the window. You know, I don't have any problem whatsoever with government agencies focusing on, you know, surveying and monitoring, you know, the social media of somebody who is a legitimate threat, or who has, you know, numerous contacts with, a subversive agent for organizations and terrorist groups. I don't think anybody has a problem with those kind of people being watched at all for legitimate reasons. But I think, for me, there has to be like a common sense angle where, when we go through security with our shoes, okay, I take mine up, I don't mind. But, like I said, the little old lady analogy I mentioned before, does a little old lady, really need to be patted down? Does a 5-year-old kid? No. A lot of it is common sense. And I think sometimes what is seen as sort of the growth of the police state is actually, it's just assumed that you've got to go through that process. But, if common sense came back into society, then instead of, okay, to this or that, when it actually isn't, that would actually make things far less New World Order-like. And people, I think, would be more agreeable to the idea of, okay, we need phone surveillance, or we need surveillance of this person or of these people. But not everybody, it doesn't have to blanket everybody.
Right.
That's the problem, I think. We've kind of lost the plot when it comes to understanding, where the lines do need to be blurred, where they do need to be separated, rather than just throwing everybody in, into one particular area or whatever.
But unfortunately, it's become easier to do that. You just say, okay, you're bad, you're a bad guy, we're going to put you over here, or we don't know if you're a bad guy or not, so we're going to put you over here. So therefore, we're simply.
But we're going to cast aspersions, and you're going to be received as a bad guy.
Right, because we're afraid, and fear propagates fear, and it propagates control. Because if I'm afraid, then I want someone to be in control.
Well, I mean, a good example of all this would be, people who legitimately love animals or the forest, so they don't want to see the forest chopped down, and so they demonstrate.
Right.
They're not. Demonstrating because you don't want a tree chopped down is not reasons to be put under surveillance.
Right.
Exactly.
No, it's not.
That's what I'm taught. But it happens. It's like, oh well, if you're, as they call them, insultingly call them, like a tree hugger, or if you're a tree hugger, well then maybe you're into this as well, and maybe into that, and we should watch you just because you want to save a tree. No,
right.
that's
because
where
you're an environmentalist.
Yeah, that's where the line gets crossed again. Somebody want to save a 300-year-old tree in their town? Well, that's good because it's a cool old tree and it looks great. It's got history attached to it. But it's kind of like, if you're a little bit eccentric or doesn't mean there's anything wrong or you've got to be watched. It just means you're not a sheep.
But sheeps want the New World Order, and government in general wants. We want people to do what we say. We don't want them to think for themselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely that angle to it, but equally, I think there should be this middle ground where, like I said, of course, everybody wants to be protected, but on the other hand, there has to, like I said, there has to be a middle ground. Otherwise, it goes down the path none of us want to go down, and it'd be the worst case possible. If
there
like
needs
20
to be balance
years from now,
and restraint. Common sense.
With balance, restraint, common sense,
checks and balances.
And we would still be as safe.
More so again.
Or not as safe, or whatever. But it's almost like it goes from one extreme to the other instead of, well, let's just sit back and take a breath and see who we need to watch and who it doesn't matter if we watch or we don't,
Let's watch Nick Redfern. He seems to be on the radar. He's investigating all this
well,
stuff.
I probably am to a degree, but I'm not someone who, violently demands this or that. I demonstrate, like, in my books, I present both sides of the coin so people can have an understanding of, like the gun control section in the book. I talk about why, there are those people who are worried about guns being taken and why they legitimately are worried from their perspectives. And then you have other people who take the view that it's not a good thing. And I think by taking the responsible approach of showing both sides of the coin, rather than being, the pastor, thumping his fist down saying this is how it is. I don't like to go down that path, because I think it's when you start preaching that this is what's going on, that's going on, you're going equally down dangerous territory of indoctrinating people.
Yes.
And the last thing I want to do, because of what I write about and whatever, I don't want to indoctrinate anyone. I want to be able to give people the data, both sides,
to
so
make
they can
an
think
informed
about
decision
it for themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, the most important thing is that we can actually debate these things and not have to worry about, the door being kicked down at 3 a.m, you're sent off to Guantanamo Bay or whatever because, somebody talked about this or talked about that. I think for me at least, the responsible way to do it, is, as I said, to present all the data from both sides and allow the reader to see what they think, because it's the public who should be in position to decide what policies we're going to have, who we want in power, and dictating to the public is not the way to do it. A clear, careful way of giving the facts and, showing them why, this is a good thing or a bad thing. I think that's the way to do it. I actually think that's a responsible way of trying to, make a good future.
It is. Actually, it's funny, you talking about gun ownership. I have an uncle who just turned 69 years old. Well, I'm going to round this off. I'm going to say about 10 years ago, he left the NRA membership, and he had been a member since he was 16 years old because he was an avid outdoorsman. He loved to hunt. He loved to hunt grouse. But he's a Democrat, as is my aunt, and he and I were talking. He said the problem is, he said the NRA has become political. He said they didn't used to be. He said they used to be about just simple gun ownership and safety and hunting. He said, but now it's political. Now they're wanting me to vote a certain way. They're telling me. He said no. He said I don't want anything that I belong to telling me how to think or how to vote. And I think that is telling.
Well, that's again, an example of how something creeps in, and an organisation doesn't look exactly as it did 30 years previous.
Exactly.
But people accept it because, as you said, it's like a slow upward rise, so to speak.
It is. It's that slow, And some people don't see it. And my favorite line from, you mentioned the Men in Black movies, that very first movie with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones sitting there, and, Will Smith is saying, well, tell people are smart. And Tommy Lee Jones is like, no, people aren't. A person is smart. People are stupid and ignorant, and they like to be told what to do. People are dangerous. If you get a mass of people, they can be. An individual you can talk to. We can have a conversation. Me, you, and Wendy can have a conversation. You get 300 people on here. No, we can't have a conversation because everybody starts wanting to follow suit. And all of a sudden, they need a leader, and there's a bunch of followers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always going to be the place in society. Some people just look to somebody else to solve things. But I think the danger is, if you give too much power to somebody to solve things, and
which we have done. Which we have done. That's what we have done. We have said, you make the decision. Whatever elected office it is, whether it's a local, state, national, we say, you make the decision for me. I don't want to think.
I mean, a classic example would be, Adolf Hitler. You know, one of the most dangerous and evil people who's ever lived. And yet, he was democratically elected.
I know.
Yeah. He was. Yep. He wasn't like part of some group that overtook. He was democratically elected.
Yeah, and there was no coup. They
and this is the guy who ordered millions of Jews into, gas chambers.
Mm-hmm.
He's just literally one of the most evil people ever to have lived, and yet he came to power in a democratic, legal way. So, that kind of demonstrates how, things like that can happen, and you can have someone like Hitler, who at one point, really was coming close to actually winning the war. He was taking over much of Europe, and the only reason he didn't get to the UK was because the UK is an island, and he just didn't have the resources to adequately invade the UK, by water. All the rest of Europe's, just joined together, so he could just march across the land masses. But, and he nearly won. We'd all be talking German by now, if we were still allowed, if we hadn't been nuked, by the time he got nuclear weapons or whatever.
Exactly. And he was well on his way to doing that.
Yeah, he was. I mean, if the war had gone on much longer, he'd have had a nuclear bomb within a year as well. And he had plans, actually, to build more advanced rockets and to send those nukes over to the US. I mean, that's in the history books, that was the next plan. And as I said, this deranged lunatic, and
he was a deranged lunatic.
Yeah, he was, and people voted him in, and so had they won the war, we would have had a new world order, and it would have been a totally grim new world order, run by the Nazis, but you would look back and see how there was no attempt to force voters at gunpoint to go and vote for him. They just went and voted for him, and then, but had he won the war, as I said, we would have been in a new world order. There's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
He was able to keep his crazy on a leash until he was in office, and then, oh boy, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, now who are we talking about again? I'm sorry. Are we talking about Hitler, or are we talking about somebody else? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I got a little confused.
Yes, we are.
Nick, I want to thank you so much again for being on the show tonight.
Well, thanks, guys. We had quite a provoking conversation.
Very much so, yes.
Where can individuals follow you, find you, and order the book, The New World Order?
Well, people can find me. I have a blog called World of Whatever. So if you just type in Nick Redfern, World of Whatever, or I think if you just type in Nick Redfern, I think the first thing that pops up is my blog, World of Whatever. People can reach me at Twitter, Nick Redfern UFO, Facebook. There's an Amazon page as well, and probably the easiest way is through Facebook. And I was always happy to chat with people if they've got questions or they want advice or share a story. So pretty much anywhere. Then the next book I've got out, as I said earlier briefly, is called the Slender Man Mysteries, and it's a first full-length non-fiction study of the entire Slender Man phenomenon, how it began and how it caused tragedies and deaths and all sorts of different things, and how it's become kind of this bizarre fictional creature, if you like, that for many people is real, and some people really do think it is real. It's come to life because so many people believe in it. That's one of the theories.
The Tulpa.
The Tulpa effect. Yes, exactly, yes. Yeah. So we want to have you back on. Can we go ahead and not giving a date now, but I want to book you for late January, early February to talk about the Slender Man.
Yeah, February would be good. Okay. January would still be too late for the publisher, too early for the publisher.
Okay. Okay. Well, we will.
February's fine then.
February. We will book you early February to talk about Slender Man. Definitely want to do that. Thank you so much for being on the show. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, like I said, kind of thought-provoking, and makes you wonder where we're going to be 30 years from now.
And any time that we can do a show and Nick Redfern walks away going, "That was thought-provoking," I'm going. That means Nick Redfern is writing notes saying, "I've got another book that I could write." And if anytime I can get Nick Redfern to say that was thought provoking, that's been a good night in my book. So, oh, Nick, thank you so much. We will have you back on in early February talking about Slender Man. If we do not talk before, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, my friend.
Well, you too, guys. You too. Have a good time.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your evening.
You too, guys. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That was fun.
That was fun.
I had a blast. I don't know if you did. I had a blast. I'm just saying.
Nope, it was wonderful as usual. As usual.
Hell, I give Nick Redfern pause for thought on a couple of things. That makes me go, yay.
Woo! Well, yeah.
I know. I'm not going to jump up out of my seat. I mean, I'm hurting. My joints hurt. I'm 41. I'm aching.
That's that cold, that weather front going through.
It is. And we do have one right now. And it is wreaking havoc on my joints.
Yep. Welcome to my world.
I don't want your world.
Too bad. I'm 10 years older than you. I can, I can go nee.
Well, that's you going on.
As I pop a few more Tylenol.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Works for you. I don't know. Oh. Nick Redfern, New World Order book. This book, I mean, honestly, folks, you need to get this book. I've read it from cover to cover, but not in one sitting because you don't read it like that. It's just, choose a topic and read. It is amazing. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's visibleinkpress.com, also amazon.com, or his website. Check it out. Nick
Travis,
is great.
what was the 0 one? I had never heard of it, and I don't even remember the entire...
The 0 hour? The 0 hour?
Yeah, what is that?
Okay, hang on. Give me a second.
You give our guests the bum's rush, and I'm going, but I had a flippin' question.
Well, no, I didn't give him the bum rush. It's 11:30. I got to be up in 5.5 hours.
Well, I need to tinkle, but I still wanted to ask that question.
Well, you know what? You had a question you wanted to ask, and you didn't. You told me to ask it, and I didn't. And the question didn't
I went
asked.
ahead and asked it anyway, then.
Well, okay, that's true. 0 hour. Mm-hmm. Okay. If the day finally comes when the New World Order makes a play to ensure the planet and its people are, in effect, enslaved under the dangerous control of an equally dangerous and powerful elite, there is a big question that needs to be answered. How will it all go down? There are numerous possibilities. One, however, stands out more than any other. In all probability, matters will kick off in the United States. Ooh, imagine that.
Yeah, imagine. I think they've already begun.
Possibly caused by the detonation of a so-called dirty bomb. He hinted on that. Mm-hmm. Worse still, we may see the complete and utter destruction of a major American city as a result of a detonation of a powerful atomic bomb. Okay, so basically the 0 hour is there's going to be one singular event that happens. And this basically is, as we were talking about, slowly bringing water to a boil, or being
boom.
Boom. Mm-hmm. The 0 hour is the boom. Mm-hmm. There's going to be something that happens.
Okay.
If you're a Marvel Universe fan, it could be the Avengers when there is the, boom right over New York City with the portal and the
Jaktari to close the portal of the bad aliens coming in.
There's that event. Mm-hmm. The Infinity War with Thanos. I mean, whatever. Justice League, which I saw. Fun movie. I invite people to go see it. Great movie. I laughed. I cried. I did. I mean, it really was a fun movie. It wasn't quite Marvel, but it was fun. Mm-hmm. And I really, and it was a good movie.
Mm-hmm. Who ended up directing that one?
Oh, I think there were like 3. I think it was Joss Whedon and Zack Snyder, and I think there was a third one. Yeah,
I had heard I had heard a comment said that even Joss Whedon couldn't pull that one out of the toilet.
No, yeah,
I haven't seen it, and that was just a comment that I read.
I went to see it Black Friday.
Oh,
Friday. Yeah, I did. I went to see it. It was fun. I actually enjoyed it. I mean, I went in with no expectations whatsoever.
Right. When it comes on cable or whatever, I will see it as well. And
I had seen. I went to the theater and saw Batman versus Superman. I was sorely disappointed. I rented Wonder Woman, and I was thrilled. I thought Wonder Woman was amazing. I thought
But was it a good movie, or did you just like the girl in the skimpy outfit?
I thought Wonder Woman was amazing. No, I thought it was honestly, right now on my superhero movie list, Iron Man is number one. Mm-hmm. Iron Man's number one. The original Batman with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson's number 2. Mm-hmm. Wonder Woman is number 3. The Avengers is number 4. Is number 4. Wonder Woman was fucking amazing. Everything in that movie worked. They did everything right. The pacing was right. The music was right. The action was right. The comedy was right. Everything was right. It was perfect.
Good to know.
It was great.
I still haven't seen it, but I will eventually.
Okay, you need to see it. It is awesome. I saw Justice League, and I went in and going, okay, I'm just going because I'm alone. I have nothing to do. I'm lonely. My kids are gone.
Oh, okay. Collectively, everyone, audience. Oh,
no, there's no. But I went and saw it, and it was great. Mm-hmm. The comedy's there. They're not really plot holes, but it's about a 2-hour movie. But you really want it to be about 2.5 hours. You really want about 30 more minutes.
So maybe the director's cut would be a better one if you were renting.
And there is supposed to be a director's cut out there, and there are some, and they expand on one particular character. I'm not going to say who, but they expand on. You don't need to expand on him. He's been expanded on. I don't want to know about him. I want to know about this character. This is the character I want to know more about. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those. It's like, okay, the directing, the editing, it's there's going to be a better version out there, and it's going to come to light, and that's the one I want to own. But it is still, I highly recommend it. I have not seen Thor Ragnarok, however, I do plan on seeing that this weekend.
Okay, marvelous. I await your critique.
Wonderful. And I keep telling June Nixon. By the way, June's birthday was today. We need to wish her a happy birthday.
Oh yes, happy birthday, Junebug.
Mm-hmm. I posted happy birthday to her, and told her hashtag brothel. Mm-hmm. That was all I had to say. But we need to. I want to have her and Kim Douthit back on just to talk movies, because there've been so many movies. We need to have that happen. So, but after that,
make it so.
It shall be so. It is so. So.
As you say that, it, so shall it be.
So shall it be. Mm-hmm. And I'm tired, and it's time for me to go to bed before I turn into a pumpkin.
Pumpkins. Oh, but only green ones, because we don't really like the orange ones.
Oh God, no.
Poor Samwise.
No Trumpkins. There's no Trumpkins.
Do you think that was a dig at that?
I do.
Oh, I gotta love Stranger Things.
Oh, I know. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Can't wait for season 3.
Woo!
You know what I've gotten into?
What's that?
Riverdale.
I waffle back and forth on that one.
You gotta. I swear to God, I was hooked first episode.
Seriously, okay. And I was thinking, here we've got another teen soap opera. With
that's what I thought too. But my God, the throwbacks to the original Archie comics, the Easter eggs, Wendy, you gotta watch. I have been hooked.
I do watch them. I watch them all, but I still kind of sometimes go, why am I this is just sick. This is sick.
But they're good. It's well written. It's well written. I love the throwbacks. I love Josie and the Pussycats. Mm-hmm. I loved. I just started watching it. So
okay. So you've been binge watching?
I've been binge watching.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I just finished episode 4 of season 1.
Okay.
But my God, I love this series. It is right now. It is my third favorite series, and Stranger Things, The Exorcist, and right now Riverdale. Those are my 3 favorite series.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I know.
I'm thinking Lucifer.
Lucifer's there, but I haven't. See, I've been recording Lucifer. I'm just gonna. I'm gonna binge watch the season. I haven't even watched the first episode yet.
Of any of them.
No. Of the most recent, I've watched. Lucifer
okay.
Till this season. This season, I'm just recording. I'm gonna binge watch it. And like it's going to be a weekend of debauchery. It's going to be me and a shitload of alcohol and Lucifer. And I'm just going to.
That sounds.
I know, right?
Right. The Baptist minister, the Southern Baptist minister, is going to spend the weekend with alcohol and Lucifer.
And there's a shitload of pagans and witches in Kansas City. Oh my God! Yes.
Okie dokie.
On that note, what do we have taking us out?
Believe it or not, it's from Monday Night's Lucifer.
I love it.
It's In the Shadows by Amy Stout. S-T-O-U-T-D. So you just pronounce it like. Mm-hmm.
Works. Everyone, we will talk to you, if not definitely not next Wednesday, but maybe one night next week. We just don't know when.
Right. We will announce and
we will announce
everyone know.
And promote accordingly.
Exactly.
Have a great night.
Good night.
There's something in the shadows. Cuts you like an arrow, shifting through the dark. Your strength is in your weakness. There's fire in your blood, hanging from that hole. But everybody knows there's something in the shadows.
Thank you for joining us tonight. You've been listening to Mystic Moon Cafe. Join us every Wednesday from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. On behalf of Wendy Schindler, this is Travis Short saying have a great rest of your week.
And that's all, folks.